Hello and welcome to yet another podcast. In today's panel, we have experts from cybersecurity firm Defensanet Securities LLP, which is based in Mumbai, to discuss on cybersecurity related topics. Team has invaluable experience in different cybersecurity domains and has been consulting private and multiple state and central government institutions, including law enforcement agencies on a range of projects. Now, to introduce the panel, we have Vinayak, who's the founder and CEO of Defensanet Securities and has decades of experience in banking and other domains and is an expert auditor. We have Ankit, who has 15 plus years of work experience, whose expertise is in critical domains like telecom infrastructure security and banking. We have an eminent speaker, Vikas Naik sir, who has been recognized as 25 most influential professionals in training and development by World HRD Congress and has been consulting multiple law enforcement agencies on cybercrime related topics and is a cyber law expert amongst other things. And lastly, we have Nikit Etambe sir, who has worked on defense projects in operational technology domain across 187 countries in the world in his 35 plus years of experience. So, team, this is definitely not a fair introduction to and not justifying your experience expertise. However, I really heartily welcome you. Thanks for joining and taking your time for this podcast.
Thanks, Rajiv.
Thanks, Rajiv, for inviting us.
Yeah, let's begin with you, Vinayak. We have worked closely, in your previous project, right, on governance, risk, and compliance, where I was also heading the IT team. How cybersecurity framework is, operating in the country. Tell us about the framework, how government is supporting the private sector, to counter cyber threats, how government is actually, monitoring the threats, internal and external, and how private sector is evolving in terms of adoption of, tools and processes to counter these threats. So give us if you could give us a good overview of, the current situation of this aspect.
Hey, great. Thanks, Rajiv, for inviting us. So, good question, first of all. So, I would like to explain what are the frameworks that we have in India and which are the fintech or private agencies that adopt or go by the framework, right? So, broadly, just for layman's language, there are either regulated entities or non-regulated entities. Regulated entities are somebody who is regulated by certain set of rules that they need to abide by. They need to ensure that all the security baselining mentioned in those rules should be followed, right? And non-regulated entity is somebody who is not regulated by government bodies. However, there are acts like IT Act, which regulates because you're part of Indian ecosystem and you are on digital ecosystem, so you have to abide by the digital laws, right? So these are the two broad sections we have. Then in regulated entities, we have certain entities which are regulated by RBI. So banks, right? All PSU banks, multinational banks, or be it fintech and NBFCs, right? They are regulated by RBI, right? Then we have insurance sector, which is regulated by IRDAI. Then similarly, we have SEBI regulated guidelines that regulates the insurance or broker firms and all. And then we have Cert-IN guidelines. Okay, so Cert-IN is a emergency response team of India, which has certain guidelines that can be followed, right? However, if you talk about the framework, it is we have broadly SEBI regulated framework and RBI framework, which is a proper framework, right? Cybersecurity framework, which banks or fintechs needs to implement and ensure that all the controls mentioned in the framework are there. And there are then government bodies which performs audits on these frameworks to ensure that the operational effectiveness of that framework is not just from the policy driven perspective, it is also on ground, right? So Cybersecurity framework is evolving. We get a lot of master direction year and year after, right? And I would say I have seen tremendous growth in last 6 to 7 years, I can say, because as the threat landscape is evolving, similarly the blue teaming per se or defensive landscape is also evolving, right? So I'll give for a few examples for you, right? So which are the latest controls that are enforced by government, which were not there earlier, right? Which was kind of used by these pen testers or attackers or bug bounty hunters, right? So, for example, if your mobile app, right, if it is running on a rooted phone, that's the first place where it gets compromised, right? So, so what happens is you have a mobile app installed in your phone. Whatever security that bank provides, be it web application firewall and a lot of other controls that they have, that's on the infra side towards bank. But agent per se, the mobile app is in phone of end user. Now, what these pen testers or hackers do, they take that mobile app, they mount it on a simulator, right, or a rooted phone, and then they bypass that app, right? Once they bypass the app, they understand these are the vulnerabilities that can be exploited, and then they do it for the larger audience by sending them certain mail and running script behind the scene to take the shell or to take access of their mobile phones, right? So now this is avoided because now RBI has a guideline that mandates that banking app cannot be installed on a rooted phone, right? So a fantastic guideline that mandates as part of the master direction, they mentioned that you cannot have a rooted phone to use banking app. So and for that, certain solutions came like RASP, which protects your mobile applications using a shield kind of a platform. Um, its job is to ensure that the app is not hosted or working on a rooted phone. Secondly, if somebody tries to exploit that app, immediately it raises a flag, right? So all these controls were not there earlier, correct? Apart from that, if you see, red teaming exercise is mandatory. So just to again explain for layman's language, so red teaming and blue teaming are two aspects. Red teamings are pen testers or hackers who simulate real-time scenarios and who tries to show that how system will get compromised in real-time hack, right? Whereas blue teaming is on the defensive side. All people who work in security operations center 24/7 who tries to protect bank or banking applications or fintech applications. Now, these cyber drills are very much mandatory, right? So once in a year, government rolls out a image that you have to mount in your ecosystem and ensure that as part of the cyber drill, you catch maximum attacks that are performed by that particular image, right? And then you have to submit that report to your CEO as well as you have to submit that report to RBI. So that clearly brings out the operational effectiveness of your blue teamers. Are they really performing their task, with the best of their ability? So all these initiatives are really helping. Recently, there was a guideline on SBOM, which is again a fantastic initiative. So I'll just explain on SBOM. So what happens is when your code is built, right? So it is developed, then it goes to a CI/CD pipeline. Generally, there is a QA check, right? Quality assurance check, and then code goes live. Traditionally, what we used to do is before making it live, we used to have a vulnerability assessment and penetration testing done on that code on OWASP top 10 guideline, and we used to see that the code is secured, right? Now RBI has mandated SBOM test. So what happens is this traditional testing cannot actually see if there is any secret key embedded in the code, right? To open any kind of encryption, or is there any open source library downloaded by developer while building the code, and that introduce some kind of a malware script in the code. So that we cannot identify with traditional VAPT approach, right? So RBI mandated SBOM, right, which ensures that it secures the bill of material. So basically, when the code is built, there is a software composition analysis done, static application security testing done, then DAST, obviously it is done, dynamic testing is done, secret scan is done, right, and bill of material scan is done, right. Now, as part of this, they identify if there are any secret keys attached to the code, which may get leaked and which may be compromised in future. Again, this was initiative recently initiated by government. I think that's really helping to uplift the game of blue teaming, I would say, right? Yeah.
Got it. Great. If you could explain what is a rooted phone,
Yeah.
so everybody understands what kind of device they need to be wary about.
Yeah. So whenever we get phone, I'll just explain it at high level. So whenever we get phone, we can download our applications from either a Google Play Store or Apple Play Store. Let's take those best Play Stores example that we have, right? Now there are certain applications that you cannot download from those traditional marketplaces. Why? Because they don't qualify for the security testing that are performed by Google or Apple, right? So, for example, the best example is free movie app that people use, right? If you ask them, just give me that app, they will say that, okay, you need to turn on your Bluetooth and I'll share via Bluetooth or some kind of other medium, but not from the store. So there's a reason behind that because it cannot be hosted on Google Play Store or Apple Play Store, right? Now, to access this third-party app, your phone needs to be rooted. That means you take the kernel access of the phone and ensure that you give certain permissions to download applications from certain black market, right? So all these hacking applications or all the third-party applications that can exploit the applications that are there in our phone are downloaded from this fourth party, I would say, which is not governed by anyone and where you see a lot of hacking applications running. So, so first thing is people try to root your phone, and then once it is rooted, then they actually have access to your internal systems and they can decide which application to be downloaded or not and which permission to be given. And that's where I can actually play with your permissions behind the scene and take access of your phone also. So rat is also installed in the same way. So once your phone is rooted, I can actually install Android rat, which will ensure that I get a remote access of your phone and I can do anything that I want. So for people, I would say general public, they should not download or take third party app from friends just for some kind of free movies and all that. You never know that app is not tested, and that is actually kind of becoming a data leakage point for you, right? So only download applications from Android or iOS market, which is pretty regulated.
So you mentioned about regulators now very actively being involved in setting guidelines and conducting audits as well, right? So what has been your experience so far since you have been on the facing side, facing the regulator, right? In banking audits, in for IT audits,
Yeah.
what has been the stance of regulators so far? If you can give us sense of over the past recent years, how proactive regulator has become, in pushing, financial institutions in strengthening their security architecture.
I don't feel they're proactive. They are pretty reactive. They allow technology to evolve. They see the consequences, how it is adopted, and how it can be bypassed. And then they enter with a lot of regulations to control the ecosystem. So, for example, neo banking or digital banking that we witnessed when it went live, there was only Niti Aayog report. There was no RBI guideline to regulate neo banking. Neo banking is something like bank running outside the bank, right? A fintech application enabling a lot of customers to be onboarded by bank, and there are a lot of banking functionality that are allowed for that fintech application to run on that application, right? Now, it helps to onboard a lot of customers for banking per se. For business, it's a great growth. But if you look at cybersecurity or regulatory guidelines, it decentralizes your operational effectiveness. So imagine you have 1,000 vendors onboarding a lot of customers for you, and they are operating on behalf of bank and doing a lot of banking activities outside the banking ecosystem, and they are not even regulated by RBI. Then the catch is that they can actually bring a lot of risk to bank, which cannot be controlled, right? So later, when they realized that okay, now people are adopting neo banking, that they came up with certain guidelines to kind of control vendor selection to everything. What kind of data can be processed? So digital lending guideline is one of the guideline that evolved later, I would say, right? So it's a reactive approach. Similarly, I think they are now trying to adopt cloud and AI, and there will be certain guidelines to control AI usage in banking ecosystem. Right now, they are still, I think, monitoring how AI is being adopted, right? So all these fintechs apps, when they have a lot of agents to verify data or validate data, and they do a lot of analysis on data, we should be also worried about, is that data getting leaked, right? So I think that's where the guideline will evolve in future.
Yeah, we will touch upon the governance of AI,
Sure.
being involved in the systems. Now, you led me to the next question, right? When it comes to data, where I think currently the focus is, as we have had recently DPDP rules being notified by the central government. So, given the recent passages, what kind of changes we will see in data fiduciaries and all the related entities who will have to retrofit the privacy controls. It's going to be a humongous change. If Niket sir and Vikas sir could throw light on this topic.
Yeah.
Yeah, Rajiv, that's an excellent question. Actually, given the context of Data Privacy Act coming into force recently, so retrofitting data privacy controls or data protection controls into the present IT scenario will involve a lot of practical and engineering focus in terms of comprehensive data discovery, cataloging of data, that is data mapping it to the appropriate categories of data, as we do for data loss prevention controls. There will be a lot of retrofitting also involved in terms of consent capture and enforcement retrofitting, I would say. So consent capture is one of the key elements of the DPDP Act, where the data subject rights have become the center point of data privacy, because data subject rights now involve not only updating the data principles on the use of data, but also the purpose for which their data would be used for, their right to withdraw the consent, as well as the right to the data being deleted if they don't want to continue with any vendor or any supplier anymore. So whichever data fiduciary. Now, this is in the context of significant data fiduciaries who handle a huge amount of data. Although it is majorly applicable to the SDFs, but then the other organizations should also not feel that they are outside the ambit of the regulatory bodies. So they too have to conform to certain rules. One good thing about the DPDP Act is that the employee data and the data privacy for people or the children below 18 years of age, that has been given special attention. So if you are a company who deals with employee data, if you are a fiduciary which deals with children data or people below 18 years of age, then there are more stringent rules, or the data protection regime which has been set for most of the data fiduciaries, the data controllers or the data processors, is more stringent in those terms. So when we talk about retrofitting these new aspects into legacy systems or those systems which are currently functional, then it calls for more engineering in terms of building the architecture in such a way that initially, just like when cybersecurity came into picture, we talked about secure by design. So similarly, data privacy also promotes privacy by design. So most of your controls, they need to be architected in such a way that whenever you are dealing with, say, personal data or personally identifiable data, that is PII data, then controls should be in place by default rather than having consent managers ticking off certain checkboxes by default. So the default on the consent managers and the default in building the privacy controls are two entirely separate things, which fall under the ambit of the DPDP Act. Going forward in terms of data retention policies, that is one area where the data fiduciaries will need to look at how to build in certain controls or to automated tools to correctly track a data principals or a data subject's data so that it can be deleted from backups, it can be deleted from their entire relationship history. So that is one area which calls for a lot of attention in terms of redesigning or retrofitting their existing systems. One other major area which needs to be tackled is the place where you are dealing with data subjects in terms of uh, uh, vendors, or where you are passing on that data onto your vendors. So the same regulatory responsibilities, or rather I would say the culture that you follow in terms of building data privacy within your organization, should be passed on to your vendors. So the same stringent guidelines that you follow in your organization should be applicable to your vendors. That is one major area which I feel needs to be looked at. So
Regarding the data subject term, it has been
yes,
beautifully presented as data principle in the Act.
right.
So data subject term is used in GDPR,
GDPR, yes, yeah,
but here in India they use data principle, which
principles.
is not subjecting the human being to a subject, right? Which
Yes,
is one beautiful thing about our Act. And I want to actually touch upon consent management, because we will be giving consent. So the data principles give consent to each and every related entity separately,
yes,
but we would not have a single view of the all the accumulated consents we have given to every institution, and that is
right,
something is not existing in, or there is no provision in the Act as of now, right?
right.
Like for example, also I'll come with them an example, sir, Vikas sir, from your experience, right? You have dealt with law enforcement agencies, in so many cybercrime related cases. Data is one angle involved, right? What would you say on this new developments?
See, in the latest development, I remember in IT Act 2008 wide amendment, there is one section which is not that not that been in use, but it is made available in 2008 itself. It is section 43A, where it makes the body corporate liable for not protecting the personal data, and it has got a huge compensation and a penalty of 5 crore rupees. At that very time, we are almost like, I'm talking, quoting this almost, which is 17, 18 years back. Okay. So what has happened? The acts are there. If it is not practiced, then there will always be a need of new act. Of course, there will be certain extra reforms which will be periodically with the evolving technology. We will need to accommodate that things, the finer side of it to be adding. But the larger part has always been covered in the acts, like IT Act. The biggest problem with the IT Act, what I face which even today everyone might agree if they have been to the police station with their crime, is the procedure, lack of procedure. The acts are there, the penalization has been declared, the thing is there. But when it comes to SOP kind of thing, like in Indian Penal Code, now it is something else, something Sahita. It is, and there is something called a criminal procedure and a civil procedure, which has always been complementing those sections. How that crime case would be, procedurally been solved. What all things are mandatory? What all things has to be booked in the court of law when it comes to evidence? What kind of statements needs to be taken, etc. Which kind of statement is acceptable and non-acceptable, etc., etc. The same kind of thing which in IT Act was little lacking, considering that CRPC will take over on that part, which actually didn't happen. And the biggest misconception between IT Act and the other Indian regular acts was a conflict was because when you talk about IT Act is the only crime you could say. Ankit and Vinayak both will agree. Vinayak being on the auditing side, Ankit being on the red teaming side, that there is something called digital footprints. Any crime happening, it is a trail of footprints. One trail missing, there is a lacuna in your investigation. Whereas in IPC, there is more of eyewitnesses, there is more of a statement, a little assumption theory also in the evidences which could speak louder. But in our case, nothing can speak louder. Assumption cannot speak louder. It is there. It is this thing started from this digital corner, ended up this digital corner, and this was a train. Everything has got its evidences. If you're not booking it in the court of law, you're making a biggest lacuna. And that is where the entire confusion starts. Getting it? That needs to be procedure. That needed to be documented. And this documentation part was, the responsibility was bestowed on none other than Cert-IN, which got active pretty late. Because if you say IT Act came into existence in 2000, got its functionality, it was adapted and it was brought into action in 9th May 2000. Then there was 2006, there was an outcry that the act is not suffice enough, and the major study and amendment came in 2006, which got enacted in 2008, and in somewhere October 2009 it was enforced and bought it. But in this period, if you say almost quite a good amount of sections were introduced, clarity was given, a baseline for justice was clearly marked. Like, okay, this kind of crimes are likely to happen. This kind of crimes can be, booked under these sections. These are the penalization. These are the fine, etc., etc. So, IT Act basically was drafted very nicely and neatly, but very less practiced document. Like I said, Section 43A. The provision of personal protection was way before the DPDP Act, and even GDPR outcry came into the action. But we were ahead of the other countries. But what did we do with that section? We didn't really apply it. Our government could not go through those sections and make these intermediaries like ISP, mobile service providers, the banking, the insurance companies, the stock regulatories. They failed to attend to these sections such a bad manner that we needed DPDP Act later. If that could have brought it in practice, I think so today the scenario would have been quite different from what we are speaking today. So this is my input on that DPDP Act part and IT Act being really strong but being made weak by ourselves.
So, do you think the strict implementation of DPDP, provisions will help in having more concrete digital trails and thereby, in helping in investigation, related matters? Do you think that will be the case?
I would half agree on it that yes, any act is good enough to bring in justice. I'll tell you, provided it is rightly practiced. But luckily, unlike IT Act, your DPDP Act is coming in 3 phases. Correct me, Niket, if I'm speaking something out of the context. You can cut me and you can please fill in. So the very firstly, in around 2023 August, the act got enacted. Okay, but we were clueless how we will be rolling out this to everybody and who all are coming under the scope of this act. Firstly, Then suddenly in November 2025, something else came up. We were given that, okay, we have started it acting, and by 2027, they have said, like, we have to implement everything, every act into enforcement by 2027. So it is a three-phase of implementation. It is coming slowly and, in a very balanced manner, where I think so the studies have been put. They have invited a lot of knowledge-based people, a lot of working groups have been involved in this thing, and it is going to be beautifully implemented. If it is interpreted in a very simple terms, which could be not wrongly interpreted by the fiduciaries, or be the principal, or be anybody who is possessing the data, I think so it is going to be wonderful. But it will not be the same blunder what it happened with IT Act 43 Section A. So it will be much better.
So yeah.
So still we will have threats of data leakage in institutions even after.
It is going to be there. It is going to be that the kind of people we are very casual with the data, very casual. I will not count any other person. All five of us sitting here right away, right? Like, if anybody asks us an email, how many times do we think like this could be misused? If somebody asks me the mobile number, we just give away. You just go to the LinkedIn account or some of the Instagram account. Some of the details are very freely available. So till I think so, we need to get matured on every level when we are talking about data leakage. Just asking what happens in our country is that we expect a lot from the companies to protect us, rather than we drawing a fine line of common sense and saying that morally we will not give you this, we will not entertain it. For example, I'll tell you the simplest example, which you all will agree today. Whenever we will go for any lecture, guest lectures, we all are being invited for the lectures, for sharing our knowledge base out of our experience and whatever knowledge, whatever greatness the people feel, right? When it comes to remuneration, the very first thing what they ask is the details of Aadhaar card and PAN card. Okay, I come across this a lot. I will not name the institution, but anybody who wants to book a plane ticket, Vikas sir, please give me your Aadhaar card. Oh my God. And Vikas sir has got no other chance. He has to give his Aadhaar card. Why? Because see, if I just quote an Aadhaar card number, will it suffice? Yes, it will suffice. But the auditor over there, the regular auditor makes it a fuss out of it. How do we know that this is Vikas Naik's Aadhaar card? This is Vikas Naik's PAN? The data leakage is there itself. Our KYC, take it into account. Every 2 years, we have to tell the bank that this is who we are. Know your customer, right? Look at the first. We give printed sign and Xerox copy signed it over. Do you have ever thought what happened to the earlier 2 years back document? Are they giving you back those documents? Are they destroying in front of you and telling, okay, sir, this is the new document we are putting on the record? So we are very casual. We only get into the hype when something is sensitized and people starts, boasting about how bad we are in governance, etc. But you ask ourselves, we ourselves are very casual. So that is the reason I said it is 50-50. The acts are there, the procedure will be there, the master direction will be given, the regulators will give the best of the best. But at the end of the day, it's you and me who are going to, play the greater role by providing or not providing or being an alert citizen. So that is where the word 50-50 comes very strongly.
So
No,
I would like
fair.
to quickly add to what Vikas sir said from banking per se. Nowadays, we have evolved in banking with the technology. If that bank takes it seriously, then it can be done. We have done it with few clients. We built a bot that takes your scanned copy of Aadhaar and actually converts your Aadhaar number and everything into a mass data. So right from scanning itself, the data gets converted into a protected data version, and you don't need to maintain that copy. So just to avoid any penalties, we kind of implemented this control with a bank. And so we don't need to be worried about scanned copies anymore. Once it is scanned, we destroy that image and that data is already converted into database, with help of a bot. However, what Vikas sir said is right. Yesterday, I was in a restaurant lunchtime and I asked for corporate discount. He said, can you give me image of your ID card? and I had to give my office ID with name, blood group, and whatnot, right? So, and that's the casual approach we have. I mean, we give it, right? So I didn't do it, but I'm just saying that that's what everybody does. So yes, I agree. Yeah, Rajiv.
Yeah. So you didn't give the consent, but he asked you for the consent, to take the picture of your ID card for the
They are
discount.
not aware of consent. They just ask me for ID
They
card.
just
So
ask. Yeah, exactly. So the thing also.
The price is, sorry to interrupt, the price is discount, Rajiv.
Yeah, price is
Always a
discounted.
price for which we sell out our data very freely.
Yeah.
yeah.
So the data principal also has to be aware that once the consent is given, cannot be taken back. So that is one,
Hmm.
and you have to be careful of why you're giving the consent. So
Yeah.
that awareness is a long learning curve for Indians. Like Vikas has said, we have been very casual with our data, which is we have a long way to go in terms of achieving that gold standard of data protection, right? Uh, so Ankit, coming to you, we have now two challenges. One is we collect data, be it in any entity, right? And one is collection, and then not using it after the purpose is solved, right? That is as per the DDPP Act, and the security part of it. And now you have been part of telecom infrastructure, banking, and the security aspects in those critical sectors. What do you have to say? How we can, should be the way forward, right, in terms of security, let's say, to start with.
Thank you, Rajiv. So, India is surrounded by unfriendly neighbors, right? Our military action towards Operation Sindoor has just increased the cyber attacks on our country. Being in critical sectors such as banking, telecom, yes, they will be targeted sectors. We will see a large increase in state-sponsored cyber attacks. So what we are seeing is, previously it was individuals, but now it's going to be state-sponsored cyber attacks. I also see the advent of AI-powered weaponization of cyber attacks also. So since everybody's sharing data, on platforms to try out, to give out your data, that will be weaponized against us finally. Also, there is a strong geopolitical data race which is going on. So everybody will have to save their data, right? Maybe for training your AI model, you're training models today with a plethora of data which is collected over, maybe a decade, I would say. So partially, if you look at, future attacks, I would also, look at something like an operational attack of submarine cable cuts, right? There are countries who are developing infrastructure to cut the submarine cable, which is carrying all the data, 95% of internet traffic, right? So the evolving of cyber attacks and also coming to a physical attack on your submarine cable is a high probability, future that I foresee. I've also seen that specialized malware, such as our payment systems which were compromised, payment switches, payment gateways, and also APT, specialized APT focus groups to target Indian banks and Indian financial sector. So with related to threats, I see a very tough situation arising for us. Year on year, cyber attacks have been constantly increasing on the Indian subcontinent and India. And we really, really need to scale up the infrastructure security, the infrastructure control, and also the governance around it. So I know laws are there, but we need highly skilled and highly integral people to implement those. So that's what we are liking. We need to increase our cyber strength also with an increase of cybersecurity budget and our skill set, growing towards the cyber secure nation, I would say.
Oh.
Yeah. You mentioned like there are now a lot of external threats. Which are the critical sectors we have to really be worried about, to safeguard them from external and internal threats? If you can, shed light on that.
So if you look at, recently our government had launched an initiative called National Critical Infrastructure Information Protection Center, NPI-IPC. Now, NPI, National Critical Infrastructure Information Protection Center, has already identified government, power power grids, health, banking, and also government systems and probably OT systems. Now, these are the critical sectors which a nation is running upon, right? And these are the critical industries which have been, targeted by cyber threats, especially state-sponsored threats. You might have seen in the news that recently, we were attacked during the Operation Sindoor time with highly sophisticated attacks on our power grids, right? There were outages of even banking sites for a lot of times. So the critical sectors are all going to be your financial services, your governmental sectors, government controllers, and power and utility.
Just to add to what Ankit said, Rajiv, if you can hear me. So, uh, I think what is lagging in our overall ecosystem is we get a lot of threat intel reports once that attack is executed somewhere else, right? So, all the indicators of compromise that we get from, be it from certain guideline or a lot of threat intel platforms that we get, right? So, ideally, how it works is you get a threat intel advisory, you adopt that advisory across your security ecosystem, and you see if there is indicators of compromise in your ecosystem and identify attack, right? And the problem here is if there is a 0-day scenario, we get it once the attack is executed somewhere else. But what Ankit is trying to highlight is state-sponsored attacks. So there are a lot of geopolitical things that are happening around the globe. We need to be really mindful of what's happening around us, and we can actually write certain precursors around it. So if particular country's president is going to other country, then we need to identify pattern if there are any cyber attack increasing. Is there a uh, you know attack vector that we can see during that time which is on rise? And there is a pattern to it, by the way. So there was a time in my career where I was doing this for 6 months, not for Indian entity, but we used to read geopolitical news for 12 hours, identify precursors and write it, try to guess if there can be any kind of cyber attack, right? And we used to write 5 to 6 precursors in a month. But if one of them comes true, then we are saving entire country from a cyber attack, right? Which is not happening with all the threat intel platforms that we have currently. So I think that's where we need to focus. That's what maybe Ankit was trying to highlight.
So have you, so since you have said you have worked on this running precursors, have you come across a threat, a real threat, and there was an impact? If you can share
Yes,
your
I cannot take names, but one president traveling to other country, and there was a cyber attack on their government entity, which was kind of predicted by us a bit, and we could actually also identify the group who is active in such scenarios, right? So again, uh, this is very critical information. However, a proper threat researchers or analysts can actually deep dive and identify this. There is definitely there's a pattern to it, right? So, yeah.
We have Cert-IN as the body to help us in terms of advisories and monitor threats. So give us more information how it is working right now with Cert-IN, how they will given the context of the DPDP Act as well, how the entities will have to work going forward with Cert-IN.
Yeah, according to me, first we need to understand difference between data leakage and data privacy breach. Okay, so DPDP is covering the privacy part of it. It's not covering the data leakage part of it. It is covering, but not in complete capacity, I would say, right? So we need something like DPDP, but on the cyber front, which is a universal framework to be adopted by Indian entity, which is more Indian version of the cybersecurity framework, considering our local issues, right? And then it should be mandated, and then it should be controlled by Cert-IN, right? So right now we don't have that. What we have is certain mandates from Cert-IN. If there is a security incident within 6 hours, we need to inform Cert-IN, right? However, on practical ground, if you see, if there are multiple third-party vendors involved, by the time bank comes to know about the security incident, if their data got leaked in that particular incident, it's beyond 6 hours, right? And then we inform. But then, what is the operational effectiveness of all this information that we provide to Cert-In? Have we resolved all the cases or not? That we need to see, right? So there should be some transparency there, that how many cases were locked, right? And how many got resolved. What is the learning around that? And that learning should be also circulated to also. For example, in terms of IOC, they do. In the case of compromise, if somebody is compromised, they provide certain information as part of the certain advisories. However, when there is a critical incident identified, that should be also, all the corrective and preventive action should be shared. That's part one. Second, I have also witnessed that most of the banks are skeptical and afraid of sharing all security incidents to Cert-In, right? Because they are afraid that it will incur a lot of questions, and maybe that incident is not that big, or they just try to compare that with what is the monetary loss, right? So many incidents come in notice. However, it is not informed, so the learning is not shared across the other fintech or banking ecosystem, because security leaders, they try to hide that incident inside the organization to avoid any kind of brand image issues and all that, right? So I think that's where we should be a little open-minded. And also, certain guideline says that you should be informing all type of incidents, but then that SLA should vary. If there's a phishing attack, and every phishing attack, if I'm trying to inform Cert-In and follow the procedure, then my team will be busy in only reporting to Cert-In, right? So we need to follow certain SLA for different type of attack, and maybe considering the attacks depth, we need to decide what is the size of attack, and then we should inform Cert-In when there is a real support needed. So maybe we need to just evolve that a bit. But currently, definitely, we have Cert-In as a regulatory guideline, which is kind of focusing on a lot of things, to regulate this ecosystem.
So coming to attacks, if you can share the real life, attacks you have faced and how you have worked upon, sir, please, Ankit, Vikas, sir, you're also welcome to share along with Niket, sir.
Recently, I will share one of my experiences. Even I was working on the CISO capacity with one of the cooperative banks. When this Operation Sindoor was there and the alerts were given to us, to keep a very close eye on the unwanted traffic. So one of our banks who was already a victim, and they have lost around crores of rupees. I was advisor to them as well as their CISO also. Suddenly there was a spike in a lot of traffic, movement in the night time. That luckily a couple of my boys who were sincere, they were monitoring. They brought it into our attention, and then immediately we said, like, as per the advisory, we were supposed to enable that geolocation kind of thing in the firewall, that nothing comes from the neighboring. So this is not coming from the neighboring thing, this is coming from Europe. Then what we did is that very night we had to seal everything, that no traffic should enter our servers and our firewalls through out of this country at all. But then next day, somehow there were certain proxies of our country were only used to attack us. So that is where we came into question mark, and then we escalated to our peer side, to bring in the little bit of things. So, but that night was a little miserable night for us. We were constantly in the fear for next 6 hours, 8 hours. We reported to it because night time, there is no way you can report it to anybody. And RBI over a period has done, I think so. Among all the regulators, I think so. One is SEBI, which is very much strict about their regulations, and second is RBI. So what they have done is, they have not only made certain things mandatory to be reported to Cert-In in certain time band, but it's also mandatory to report it to RBI and one more government agency. Some CyMac or something like that. They've recently formed that thing. And where all this incident and event, whichever you think was unsuccessful, has to be reported to that particular thing, and they will analyze further. And further advisory, as Vinayak quoted, it will be escalated to a group of working group scientists or some experts like Ankit, and they will get some remediation and all these things. But when we did that, they were very clear that the financial institute of a very small bank in the remote area of the Maharashtra state getting attacked, so they put everybody on the alert. So this was one of our experience, but we could contain it, we could stop it, and certain other tweaking and fine tuning in the firewall with the firewall support team also, we could bring those attacks down. So this was my experience on the private side. Legal side, there are many experience, but the time would be short. So others, I think so Ankit and Vinayak could be giving you more experience on the private side.
No, we should have actually further discussions on on your experience on the legal side, which is a very long one. It will be another separate podcast itself. Yeah, but thanks for sharing. Yes, yes, Ankit, Niket sir.
Yeah, Ankit, please.
So I can add one incident which is more on the internal security incident. So we all say that OTP is very secure, right? Uh, every transaction should have a OTP and I'm safe. Is it really secure? I'll just give you an example. Okay. So what if your database administrator goes rogue, right? Which means Rajiv Jain is a name, there's a mobile number to it, and there's a bank account and other details, right? So as a database administrator, I go there, I change your mobile number by my mobile number, okay, in database. And after that, whatever transaction I do, OTP is coming to me as a DBA, okay? And you're sleeping and suddenly you wake up in morning and you see that there's a transaction of 30,000, 50,000, and you have not even initiated, right? And all those logs are again, since the person is administrator, deleted. uh, and this is done in a small amount for multiple clients so that people don't see any flag anywhere, almost for a time of a year, right? And imagine the impact, right? And after that, client cannot even disclose this to media because it's a reputational impact, correct? So this kind of attack happens, and there is a RBI guideline for this. There should be column level encryption, where any changes made in the column level entries of database from backend should be raising a flag and should be blocking the DBA immediately, raising a flag to SOC team. But many banks don't implement that, and that's where because the solutioning part is bit on the costlier side, and that's where they become victim of such attack, and then they call us what happened, how OTP got bypassed, right? So we cannot simply rely on OTP. However, this control helps. So most of the multinational bank already has control around this, right? So we are ahead of this curve. But yeah, this is one of the internal incidents. So even your security professionals can go rogue, and they can actually commit the crime, right?
If the logs are getting destroyed, then there's no way out. There is nothing in our control. Then the only thing I can see is money going out, and we'll have to file a cybercrime case. And then the struggle with the cybercrime officers is something Vikas sir knows well.
No, but there is a provision. So there is always a control to have active backup of logs. So Ankit can maybe put some light from SOC monitoring per se for such incident. What are the controls? And there are controls, but then again, lack of awareness that this can also happen. Yeah, Ankit.
So maybe there's always anti-forensic procedures also, right? When going forward, we are also going to see these invisible kind of attacks. Probably there are some other controls which we would see which are coming. That's when cryptographic controls have to also be strengthened. With the advent of faster computing power, having your data lakes, it's also protecting your data there. So imperatively, if you look at the organizations, a lot of them have tried to put data offices in place, which ensure that the data managed by an organization is secure, it is tracked. The final nail, I believe, is coming openly and sharing that information. as rightly pointed out by Vinayak, all clients don't want to release the news of their compromise. That causes loss in customer confidence also. So, that's how certain and governmental agencies can come in, where they get a common forum to share this intel, let's say not to the world, but amongst themselves. We have special threat intels also, which can avoid and avert a lot of cyber attacks, right? Let's say if one target industry or one organization becomes a victim, that information can save 10 others, right? So the level of collaboration here is, I think so today, the highest importance within our Indian business industry.
Also, Rajiv, just to add a bit here, threat intel should also be there for common man, right? So if there is a WannaCry kind of attack and we come to know certain operating system is vulnerable, we get a lot of advisory for corporate. But if you see the internet usage is maximum done by people at home, right? And they are not regulated. So they don't have any guideline. There is no secure internet option. They don't have any government guideline coming to them saying that these are the ways to secure yourself, right? Maybe that's where we need to take our future. Have a secure surfing guideline for school kids to make them understand how to surf on internet, right? It should start from school. I mean, my daughter is 6. She's already on YouTube and multiple channels and absorbing a lot of content, right? So I feel that there should be certain regulations that or certain awareness programs at school level to teach them beyond computer how to surf securely on net, right? So maybe that is a need of a time.
Yeah, certainly. So I have like two things to summarize this. One is where I'm sharing my data, and I have the visibility of wherever I've shared the data, for what purpose it is used for, and that visibility is for all the institutions where I've shared the data. Currently, I think, let's say I go to hospital, I share my personal data. They're reporting to CERSAI as well, right? They're taking my consent, or they will take my consent. And health is going to be extremely complex situation for when in terms of DPDP implementation, right? Yeah, they're sharing my data with CESI. So that is just one one entity. There's so many other entities which will take my data, and I will have to, I mean, it will be so overwhelming, like to figure out where all I've shared my data, right? That is one. Two, right, like you correctly mentioned, individuals don't have any clue as to what to do when they are attacked in various forms, through cyber attacks. That is something system has to be strengthened going forward by the government agencies, for the benefit of the entire population, in fact, because a lot of them are using smartphones. So, and a lot of them are on social media. So there's a huge need for strengthening this aspect as well. So, yeah, thanks. We come to end of our session, and thank you so much. It was quite insightful. I will. Your experience actually says a lot more than what I have just asked. There are many other questions I can ask, but really, short of time. I really hope to host more discussions on other topics, deep dive further on certain topics, and hope to catch up again. Thank you all so much.
Yeah, thank you, Rajiv. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Rajiv. Thank you so much. Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you.